Yep, I'm sure you read the title of the video or the thumbnail or whatever. I'm going to make it clickbaity as all get out, but my theory for Across the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse is that Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, is actually a vampire. Those jokes that Miles was quipping at him about him being a vampire or whatever, that was extreme foreshadowing. Thanks for watching the video, everybody. But for real, I have some points here on why I think that Miguel O'Hara is actually a vampire. I'm going to go ahead and list them out real quick so this video is not too long here. Okay, first off, Miguel O'Hara's origins. If you're a comic book reader at all, you know the fangs, the talons, the red eyes, the aggressiveness. This is not uncharacteristic for Spider-Man 2099. To be brief, his origins are much different. He was infected with a virus by the company he worked for because he threatened to quit, so he was dependent on some drug that company made. In order to wean him off of that, he merged his DNA with that of a spider. So, very different origin, and that's why he has a different power set. The fangs secrete a venom that paralyzes people. I believe the talons he uses for while crawling. He uses those weird red web things. Yeah, he's basically a different character, essentially, just with the same Spider-Man trappings aesthetically. He also is a lot more aggressive in the comics as well. So all of these characteristics, if you're a comic reader, this doesn't really raise any alarm bells. That's just how Miguel. In fact, it's actually a pretty good adaptation of Miguel's character on screen. Pretty faithful to the material. However, none of that is brought up in the movie. They leave it intentionally blank. And I'm thinking it's intentional because there's a lot of people pointing out across the internet. The first Spider-Verse movie actually sets up a lot of what Across the Spider-Verse delves into years before. So obviously a lot of planning, a lot of thought, a lot of attention to detail are put into these movies. And I am praying that they don't get overworked and that they're compensated fairly, which we all know that they're not, but I can hope. So I think that Miguel's origin is intentionally left unstated to leave an air of ambiguity. Playing off of that, besides Miles is literally calling him a vampire, all the Spider-Man characters kind of razz on Miguel for not being a real Spider-Man. That train scene where Miles is chasing him up the space elevator, Miles just straight up says, "Are you sure you're even Spider-Man?" Peter says that, we're all kind of funny, cracking jokes, but Miguel is serious all the time. He's clearly out of place. There is a certain thread of characteristics between, even when they're literally different people, that all Spider-Man kind of are jokey and that kind of thing, but Miguel is uncharacteristically very stoic. Again, if you're a comic book reader, that's not a surprise, but I think these are being called to intentionally. Here's my next point. There's no Madam Web. And I think this is very interesting for a Spider-Verse movie dealing with multiple Spider-Man and all that stuff. Traditionally in the comics, Madam Web is the character that kind of holds everything together. The woman in the chair, so to say. She can see the multiverse, that kind of thing. And if you played any of the Spider-Man games, Shattered Dimensions, Edge of Time, the cartoon used Madam Web. I mean, she is basically, this is her one use in stories like this, is to be the linchpin of how the Spider-Men can talk to each other. And she's not using this at all. When I think it would have been really interesting to see like an alternate version of Aunt May play her or something like that. I mean, you can play around with that. I think it would have been really interesting, but they don't use her. Let me instead point to a character called the Master Weaver from the Spider-Verse comic event that Dan Slott wrote. This is a character that is used by a villainous group of vampires to hunt Spider-Man. The Master Weaver is how they get around the multiverse. He can, cut off connections to different multiverses so that they become pocket dimensions and stuff like that. He has a whole character arc in the Spider-Verse event. I don't think they're going to be using that in the movie at all, but I think it's very interesting that Madam Web is absent, and what does Miguel use to send people back to their respective universes but a giant spider that weaves a cocoon around them to send them back? Now, is that a reach? maybe a little bit, okay? But I just think it's very interesting that there is no Madam Web. I think that's a huge flag of some kind. Now, you may be wondering, if you're not a comic reader, hold on, did you say a group of vampires that hunt Spider-Man? Yes. There are a group of Spider-Man villains called the Inheritors. They're energy vampires. They hunt totem characters. Those are heroes / villains that, like, name themselves after an animal. So there's the Spider Totem. So every Spider-Man across the multiverse kind of fits this archetype of a Spider Totem. There's Rhino Totems, Panther Totems for Black Panther, etc., etc. It's a whole thing. I think it's kind of dumb. But the Inheritors feed off of Spider-Man energy. They go around different multiverses, they hunt Spider-Man, kill them, absorb the energy, and that's how they live. They're basically vampires, but just for Spider-Man. They use the Master Weaver to get around the multiverse and hunt different Spider-Men. Now, what's interesting here is that the Inheritors are a uniquely Spider-Man villain. They're introduced in J. Michael Straczynski's run of Spider-Man back in 2001 with Morlun. They have been built upon ever since. I don't know why Spider-Man keeps fighting vampires for some reason, and they're not even like real vampires either. Like Morbius is not even a real vampire either. He just kind of looks like one. And this is the same with the Inheritors. They don't actually suck blood or anything like that. They kind of just look and dress and act like traditional vampires, but they just grab you with their hands and absorb your energy. Point being, this is a Spider-Man villain, part of his rogues, if you will, in the later canon, and they've not been used in any Spider movie before this. So this would be a chance for the Spider-Verse films to use a villain that hasn't been used before, and I feel like every Spider-Man movie kind of strives to do that. Of course, the first Spider-Verse movie used Kingpin and Prowler, Spider-Man villains that hadn't been used in the movies before that. And then the second movie, of course, as we know, uses Spot, Spider-Man villain. And even before that, Tobey Maguire movies, each one uses different villains: Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Sandman, Venom, and then Andrew Garfield uses Lizard and Electro, and New Goblin, I guess, kind of used whatever. And then Tom Holland's, of course, Vulture, Mysterio, and oh god, I guess the third one just reuses all the old ones from before, but you get the idea. They're literally the same character. Point being, Spider-Man movies uses new Spider-Man villains as often as they can. They don't want to be compared to previous films unless that's the entire point. So using the Inheritors would automatically make it a unique Spider-Man film for villain usage. This is my ultimate point, is that Miguel is actually an inheritor. Another point to that is shaky backstory. When Miguel says that he, replaced a dead Miguel who had a family, but by doing that he deleted the universe, and Peter was a witness to that, it was glossed over so quick, it's begging for a re-examination. In this third movie, if Spider-Verse wasn't split into two parts, Across and Beyond, that backstory would be a third act twist. We would go back to that same moment and then reveal that something actually was done differently. And the only reason why that backstory holds any water is probably because Peter Parker witnessed the tail end what was happening. Miguel sold him on the story, and he believes it. And now he has, like, a witness. That's what I think is going to happen, regardless if Miguel is an inheritor or not, which is what I'm putting forth here. I think that there's something up with that backstory. There's going to be some twist that is revealed in this third movie that backstory is not all is what it seems, in my opinion. I think it's too obvious. But regardless, I'm saying that backstory is going to point to the fact that he's an inheritor. That he killed that version of Miguel and absorbed his life essence and then took his place as Miguel O'Hara. That's what I'm saying. I think that there might be some, twists and turns to the inheritors. Traditionally, they just hunt spider people and absorb their energy and then bounce. But I'm thinking maybe in this version, maybe the inheritors destroy the multiverse that they absorb, something like that. You could work with that somehow. And my final point here is that it plays heavy into the themes of the Spider-Verse movies. if it turns out that Miguel O'Hara is an inheritor and he is feeding off these spider people, he is feeding off of their misery. He needs these canon events to happen so that spider people can keep being created and so he can keep feeding off of them. If that's the reveal, that these Spider-Man is only being put through these canonically miserable events of their lives so that one person can benefit from it, I mean, how more on the nose can you get about a critique of the comic book / movie industry, that Spider-Man has to keep going through these canon events to, appease some unseen overlord, essentially. I don't think it gets more on the nose than that. I think it ties in perfectly with the themes of the movie. I think it creates an interesting villain. It's an interesting take on Miguel O'Hara and the Inheritors. I think it works too well, honestly. And of course, I could be completely off the mark on this one, but I think there's enough evidence to suggest that might be the direction that they're going. So, there it is. And if, when the third movie comes out, if I'm proven completely right, I'm going to be expecting a little bit of a cut from Sony here. At least they can bring me on to the next project. I'm available. I write. So Sony, if you're listening to this, if I got all this correct, just hit me up. Yeah.